And this is something that you don't get from the BMW, you don't get it from the Audi or the Mercedes, and you don't get it from the Porsche even. So this is where this Alfa shines in A mode, which is kind of a sad thing to say about an Alfa Romeo, but in electric mode, this is where it's at its most, I don't know, put together, let's say. Welcome to Downshift, my name is Matt, and this thing's name is the Alfa Romeo Tonale. It is the first Tonale we've ever seen from Alfa Romeo, and it is the first electrified Alfa Romeo that we've seen. And today, we're gonna cover the best and the rest and how it competes against its main rivals in its segment. Let's get into it. First thing we have to talk about is kind of the elephant in the room, right? This is the fact that it's not entirely Alfa Romeo, it's not entirely Italian, which is kind of why you buy an Alfa Romeo. This thing kind of started life, in terms of the chassis at least, as a Jeep Compass. So it's kind of a front wheel drive first architecture, again, kind of a for Alfa Romeo, but it's almost an identical product to the Dodge Hornet, which just came out, and to me, that might even be a little bit more of an affront. So you can see that on places like the fact that it has Mopar on the back brakes and all the windows say Mopar, and this is a problem because that's not luxury tier. And what that means is either the Dodge Hornet is either too good for its segment, or that leaves the Alfa with maybe a little bit of an overpriced sense for what you're getting. This Alfa Tonale starts at $43,000 as base, about $3,000 more than the Hornet RT, but as tested, this thing is jacked all the way up to $57,000. It's still about $3,000 more than the most expensive spec of Hornet that you could get. So in a reductive way of looking at it, they're kind of trying to sell a Dodge at BMW X1, M35i, and Audi Q3, Mercedes GLA prices. But when you remove the Hornet aspect of it, and you just focus on this thing and its main competitors, aka the Germans, price spec'd out $57,000 is just about exactly what you would spend on a BMW X1 M35i in very similar equipment. And the third thing is that it has less power than the Hornet, the sister vehicle. This does 285 horsepower versus the 288 that you get in the Dodge Hornet RT. Again, we'll test that car next week, but that's 3 less horsepower than the down-market economy version. And this has 347 pound-feet of torque, which is brilliant. It's loads of torque. It's more than the BMW X1 M35i, but it's 36 pound-feet less than you get in the Hornet at 383. So again, it's also, a lot of that it comes from the fact that this is missing the power shot feature that you get in the Hornet. This is also a little bit less horsepower that you get in the X1 M35i, but like I said, this has more torque, and like way more torque, like 50 pound-feet more torque. But with that out of the way, let's talk about all the things that I love about this car. And the first thing that Alfa purists will love is the fact that, well, it looks like an Alfa. You have a very conventional Alfa Romeo face. You've got your triangle grille as you typically would, but it's in black, and it's in black for all trims aside from the base TI. And you have the same triple dip LED headlights as the updated Giulia and Stelvio. And of course, this car is draped in this gorgeous Misano blue. I would also accept the green or verde. And around the side, the wheels are classic Alfa Romeo. The circles, the flower petals, whatever you want to call it, but it's classic Alfa. And peeking out behind is the red brakes, signifying that you've got the Brembos, and just above you have the fender badge designating Veloce or Speedy. And then the profile, it's very Stelvio looking. In fact, I was working in and producing an event this weekend, and there was a blue Stelvio quadrifolio rocking around the event that I mistook for my car several times. And around the back, the rear tail bar still has the triple dip, similar to the front, and it's got a 3-dimensional effect like you get in the LC500. And then all the way at the bottom, you've got dual chrome outlets for your exhaust, and that is specifically and exclusively for the Veloce. I have to say, of all the competitors in this class, the Q3, the GLA, the X1, even the new X2, this is the best looking. And the next is the fact that it's pretty fun to drive. We're in the Veloce trim here, and this is the fast one. It's got big red brakes, it's got Brembo brakes, it's got adaptive suspension. It only works in dynamic mode, but you have adaptive suspension. It makes fun electric noises, and then you've got turbo noises, and then it makes way more noise out the back than any 1.3 liter 4-cylinder ever probably should, but it sounds actually pretty good. It'll do 0 to 60 in like 5.5-ish seconds, so it is veloce, in fact. And on all four corners, you've got Pilot Sport all season, so the grip and the front end handling is pretty nice. On the brakes with the Brembos. Turn in, excellent. And then power on, there you go. And then I want to talk about the size and how they've used the space. Now pay attention here. This Tonale is 6 inches shorter than the Stelvio. It's also 2 inches narrower than the Stelvio. And yet, you have more rear seat and trunk space even with the fact that it's a plug-in hybrid. You have 5 more inches of rear passenger space, and your trunk space is great. It's very similar to the class-leading BMW X1. So it's interesting that despite a smaller footprint, you have a significantly larger and more practical vehicle than its sister Stelvio. And it is competitive with segment leaders like the BMW X1 in terms of trunk space. Also, fun fact, if you're wondering, this thing, since it does have the battery and it's a plug-in hybrid, is 200 pounds heavier than the Stelvio. Fun fact. And it's not just the exterior that's incredibly Alfa Romeo, but the interior, also instantly recognizable as Alfa. Of course, we'll start with your steering wheel. You have the start-stop button on the left-hand side of your steering wheel, as you typically would. It's not red like the QV. Maybe there'll be a QV later, but it's unlikely. But you have the huge metallic column-mounted paddle shifters. Personally, I really like it. And then down on your center console, you have your DNA drive selector, D for Dinamica or Sport, N for Naturale or Normal, and A for seemingly un-Italian, Advanced Efficiency. Apollo does have a bit of a cringe factor for these things, and I kind of get it with the DNA, but I do like the paddles, and the start-stop button makes sense, and it's kind of fun once you get used to it. And then the screens here are pretty familiar Uconnect graphics, but the startup and shutdown graphics are really, really cool. Plus you get little Italian tidbits in your wing mirror, and it's got luxury car amenities like heated and cooled front seats, heated steering wheel, and embroidered Alfa Romeo logos into the headrests, and a big panel roof. It's honestly really nice in here. But we're going to slow it down into A mode, or advanced efficiency mode, because I want to talk about some of the dailier stuff, or the electric stuff. Now, this being the plug-in hybrid means you do have dedicated EV range. In fact, you have 30 to 31 miles of EV range. It's kind of interesting, actually. It takes about 3 hours to charge on my Emporia. It's level 2, and I can, of course, schedule that through the Emporia app, and when I want to charge, when it's less expensive to charge. Anyway, I got a link in the description actually if you guys want 5% off. But anyway, about 3 hours on level 2 versus like 13 and a half on level 1. But 31 miles of fully electric range. When you are topped up, you can go through like the first quarter of the electric range and it'll still say 31, maybe 29 on the dash. And then it'll be a more like active live reading, but it's just kind of funny. But let's say you've run out of all of your electric juice and then you're just operating it as a normal hybrid. Well, you're good for about 28 miles of combined MPG at that point. I was seeing closer to like 30, maybe low 30s up to 32, depending on how you drive. And then if you go into e-save mode, that will prioritize saving the electric range. You still get some hybrid assistance, but it is less so. And then your fuel economy will suffer from there. But the thing that I was most impressed with is just how refined this is in the handoff between gas and electric. It's not quite Toyota level in terms of refinement, but it's worlds better than the Jeep system that we were in last week in their Rubicon 4xe, which is interesting because that's also a plug-in hybrid from the Stellantis umbrella. And being an Alfa Romeo means it's maybe a little bit more interested in history and pedigree and being strange than being modern and well-equipped, but I'm not missing anything here. Your Uconnect system looks great. It can be a little laggy at times, depending on what screen you're going in, but the graphics are fantastic. You get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You've got performance pages to monitor horsepower, torque, turbo pressure. You get hybrid pages too, that'll do things like eco-coaching and help you drive more efficiently. You've got Alexa built in, you get over-the-air updates, so it's always completely up to date. And you've got a completely digital instrument cluster, which is very similar to Audi's virtual cockpit, and I love it. Your 360 cameras have good resolution. It does feel like the shutter speed is a little bit off when you're moving slowly, but ultimately it works well. And your wireless charger has some fun stuff to it. It's got an Alfa Romeo logo in there. It works. It doesn't heat up your phone too much, but every time you put it in the tray, a notification flashes up on the screen to let you know that something's in there, which seems superfluous. And your safety suite, your driver assist stuff, it's pretty good. It's not going to change lanes for you and it'll make you keep your hand on the wheel, but it is pretty solid, even through the construction around my house. The only weird thing is that it's lacking a head-up display. But that's enough talk for now. This is an Alfa Romeo after all, so let's go for a drive. Behind the wheel of the Tonale, we are in Dinamica mode with the stiff dampers on, and we're gonna send it. Okay, hard on the Brembos, tip in, roll power, traction, traction, right there on corner exit. When you're trying to put power in, that's when it stops being an Alfa a little bit. It's pretty Alfa. I can forgive, you know, the similarities between the Hornet and stuff, but on corner exit, when I get on power, I want a little bit of this from the back end. I want a little bit of scoot. And this, being on a Compass chassis, it's front wheel drive first. Sends power to the back. It'll send more power to the back, but it doesn't have that organic feel. And even when you're just deploying power and just driving kind of normally, it does feel, I guess not driving normally, but when you're driving with a little bit of pace and on a road like this and trying to enjoy a fall day, it just feels a little bit confused. Like it's got too much to worry about, from turbo pressure and electric, and you know, what should the gearbox be doing? It's the Ace and 6-speed versus, you know, something like a ZF8, and there's just a lot for it to think about. And I guess maybe it's not totally fair because mentally I'm comparing it to the Giulia and the Stelvio Quadrifolios, which are beautiful driving cars, absolutely fantastic, almost faultless, except for the fact that they don't always turn on in the morning. But aside from that, this just feels a little bit more removed and a little bit less involved. It does feel like the car is thinking about it more. But that said, I don't totally know who's going to be driving this Tonale, a plug-in hybrid subcompact crossover SUV thing. Are they going to be driving that like a Quadrifoglio? Probably not. So then what you get when you switch into Naturale mode is decent steering feel. You get decent cabin isolation. I don't love the wheeziness from the engine, and it's such a shame because I know out back, outside, it sounds brilliant, especially for the fact that it's a 1.3 liter 4-cylinder. But if you want to refine things even further, switch down into A, advanced efficiency mode, and now we just bop around in electric. And this, I think, is the brilliance of this car. When you turn off the engine entirely and you're just rocking around in the 30 miles of electric. It is quiet, it is smooth, it is predictable, it builds power. It's so refined. So much more so than you're gonna get from the Audi, so much more than the BMW, the Mercedes. You're not gonna have that raspy 4-cylinder kind of buzzing at you. So when you are just driving it like a normal civilized person in electric mode, maybe you're tired and going to work in the morning, this is the better experience. This is the smoothness, the quietness, the refinement. You can listen to your podcast. It's just nice. And this is something that you don't get from the BMW. You don't get it from the Audi or the Mercedes, and you don't get it from the Porsche even. So this is where this Alfa shines in A mode, which is kind of a sad thing to say about an Alfa Romeo, but in electric mode, this is where it's at its most, I don't know, put together, let's say. Anyway, I think it's probably a good time to get in. Oh, the seating position's too high also. That's really my only gripe, but final thoughts. So that is the best and the rest of the Alfa Romeo Tonale. It's not a perfect car, but what is? And to be honest, a lot of the shortcomings that it comes from is just simply in relation to the fact that the Dodge Hornet exists. When you take this thing in a vacuum, or just remove the Hornet really, it actually is very competitive with the Germans, and it's the only one in this segment offering a plug-in hybrid. And ultimately, I like the car. So thanks again to Alfa Romeo. This is our first Alfa Romeo press loan, so thank you to them, thank you to you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.